What is up, you guys? Welcome back to part 2 of the Gaylag Archipelago series. I'm Sam. So last time we talked about the Soviet Union and what it was like to be gay, lesbian, whatever, in that world. And today we're going to be talking about life for LGBT people under communist Yugoslavia. While the society started out quite skeptical of homosexuality due to anti-bourgeois tendencies and long-held patriarchal values, in many ways, the society was far more progressive than the West would lead one to believe. So for this episode, we're going to have it broken down into 4 key sections. The first section will be about the formation of Yugoslavia. And for that, I'll take you through some of the history prior to the formation of the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia to give a greater context of what life was like before and after. Because obviously we got to compare and contrast of what it was like before socialism and what it was like after. The next part will be on Yugoslavia and the USSR friendship. So we'll talk about the post-World War II period and the establishment of the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia and the role of the Soviet Union, if any, in shaping policy surrounding the gays. And then the third section will be on Yugoslavia and the USSR split. Post-splitting of the USSR, we'll discuss the economic shift in socialist Yugoslavia and the many advances in the country on gay and lesbian issues due to economics, medical advances, and pop culture. And then lastly, we'll conclude it with the breakup of Yugoslavia and the death of socialism in the region, going into the balkanization of Yugoslavia and the many blows and advances for LGBT people in a post-socialist region with greater influences from pro-EU upper classes, religious fundamentalists, and a revival of right-wing parties. So let's get started. So the region that would later become Yugoslavia had a long path of being primarily rural and patriarchal traditional region with a long history of occupation, including the empires of the Ottomans, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which as a result created a multi-ethnic, religious, and cultural zone where many of the groups that were once a singular ethnicity devolved into multiple ethnicities. After getting tired of being consistently taken over by different empires, the regions in the Balkans came together in 1919 and Yugoslavia was formed. And this included Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, which also included the autonomous regions of Vojvodina and Kosovo. So while this country consolidated together to prevent empire, this didn't last very long. In 1941, Yugoslavia, like a lot of Eastern Europe, was occupied and split by German Nazis and Italian fascists. And as a result, lots of Balkan Jews and Roma were massacred in death camps. And also a large number of Serbians were exterminated due to the cooperation with the fascist Croatian revolutionary movement known as the Ustasi, which viewed themselves not as Slavs, but instead as Germanic people, and as the Serbians as a lower grade human. This didn't include the Muslim Bosniaks. They viewed them as fellow Croats who just happened to be Muslim, and their goal was a greater Croatia. As a result of occupation, the Yugoslavian revolutionaries formed together the Council of National Liberation. And in 1944, the Communist parties led by Joseph Tito, in collaboration with the Soviet Red Army, helped liberate the capital, Belgrade. In 1946, the creation of the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia was formed. And despite many claims from Western pundits of being satellite states that just bowed to the will of the USSR, in many cases, policy was left up to the region, and this included policy in regards to homosexuals or gays, whatever you want to call them. Though in 1948, this relationship between the two countries severed, and the USSR and other Eastern communist countries broke economic and diplomatic ties due to Tito's disagreement with Stalin over many areas, including the Greek Civil War and creating a Southern Slavic Federation in collaboration with countries like Albania. As a result, in the 1950s, Tito had to seek assistance from other countries due to the highly rural society, which was devastated by occupation war, and received lots of aid from the United States, giving some assistance in development. In June 1950, worker self-management reform was passed, and this was the first of many new policies that devolved the state to less centralized features. In 1959, homosexuality was banned throughout the whole country of Yugoslavia, and this was primarily due to a fear of young people being seduced and its supposed ties with the bourgeoisie, who clearly want the collapse of socialism so it can go back to serving their interest. As a result, the law persecuted many religious clergy, not surprising, and many members of the Yugoslav People's Army, which basically allowed the conversation of homosexuals to remain in conversation within the Communist Party. Though as a result of this, the army was one of the key pushers for decriminalization in Yugoslavia, and this is primarily because they wanted to stop showing high-ranking officials of the military of being gay or having same-sex interactions. This wasn't because they thought there shouldn't be persecution, but instead they thought it looked poorly on their military. Though despite all of this, only around 600 people were ever in prison throughout this illegal period in Yugoslavia, which in comparison to many Western European countries who had imprisoned thousands or tens of thousands of people in the same time, Yugoslavia probably seemed like a much more liberal place to be than a lot of Europe and the world. In 1960s, market socialism was instituted by Tito, and this basically allowed competitive forces to intercept the region of Yugoslavia, which the goal was to boost productivity. It also, in some cases, built a competitiveness between different ethnic groups, which Tito for a very long time fought against and would kick people out of the party for ever talking about their own ethnic interests versus the interests of everyone in the country. In 1971 and 1974, this was accelerated by constitutional amendments and a new constitution, which shifted the country from a federation to a confederacy, or a federation, whatever you want to call it, but basically more devolution of power to their different regions in the country versus a central power. This was 1970s. This was shown by the Yugoslavian state dictating to all republics to decriminalize homosexuality. For a while, Yugoslavia was trying to do a slow and partial decriminalization path to allow a greater emancipation around sexuality in Yugoslavia, which was in comparison to the West, passed laws and then told people to catch up. And they did this by first decriminalization of lesbians and then later reductions in sentences for being caught in the act. But in 1976, this was authorized by the central state due to a long-held debate between legal experts and medical experts, since the medical experts started studying Kinsey's work and started arguing for treatment versus imprisonment. In response to this, in 1977, the individual republics of Croatia, Slovenia, Montenegro, and the autonomous zone within Serbia, Vojvodina, decriminalized homosexuality, and the rest did not. One of the key reasons for this was the Adriatic region, where many of these nations or republics were located, had a big market for foreign tourism and wanted to be able to offer gay-friendly tourism since it was a large moneymaker at the time. In 1980, the leader Joseph Tito died, and not long after, the International Monetary Fund instituted austerity programs as a result of acceptance of aid, which devastated the economy and increased unemployment and instability within the region. While all this was going on in 1979, Zagreb punk pioneers Dirty Theater had one song released with the phrase, "I'm in free male love," and this was the start of a larger queer cultural scene within the country, which also included art and music, primarily new age and punk. The record sold hundreds of thousands of records, primarily to young Yugoslavian people. And in 1980, many other groups started playing up the gay rights stuff, including Belgrade art rock band Idoli, who wrote pro-gay songs in their debut album, I Rarely See You with Girls. The message was less explicit than the prior song, but it allowed it to be pushed in mainstream radio, including state radio, for years to come. Zagreb, which was in Croatia, also had the first gay radio station in the entire Eastern Bloc, and the Croatian island of Rab hosted one of the first lesbian international camps, which was pretty progressive at the time. Belgrade, the capital of Yugoslavia, which was located in Serbia, despite not having decriminalized homosexuality yet, was said to have, in quotations, a far more developed network of gay clubs and cruising areas than tolerant Ljubljana, which was located in Slovenia. This was according to Canadian magazine Body Politic. And in April 1983, Ljubljana Film Festival showed the very controversial film Framed Youth, The Revenge of Teenage Perverts. The film was about London LGBT youth who were interviewing Londoners on the street about their views on homosexuality. While the film was acceptable to view in Yugoslavia, the only copy in North America was confiscated by the Canadian Ontario Censor Board, doing it to be inappropriate. So it shows, despite claims of mass censorship, in many times the West was far more censorship around ideas of like sexual freedom, which is kind of crazy. In 1990, the Central Party ended in Yugoslavia and had its first round of multi-party elections. As a result, ethnic separatists, many of whom had support from Western governments, won pretty much everywhere except for Serbia and Montenegro, where the Socialist Party and Slobodan Milosevic re-won the election. As a result, Yugoslav civil wars break out, which as a result created an aftermath of huge waves of homophobia, primarily due to a big push from religious fundamentalist leaders and right-wing politicians who had regained power in this multi-party democracy. In 1992, Slovenia, Croatia, Macedonia, and Bosnia gained independence from this being the complete end of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. While countries like Slovenia and Croatia had shorter civil wars and Macedonia had none, Bosnia was still in a civil war due to conflict between the local Serbians who wanted to remain part of Yugoslavia and the Croats and Bosnians who wanted to secede. Behind this Bosnians' backs, though, the Croatians and Serbians discussed splitting Bosnia for themselves. One of the reasons was they wanted to either keep it as part of Yugoslavia, and the Croats wanted to create a greater Croatia, which you've all heard that before. In 1994, the Republic of Serbia decriminalizes homosexuality, and this includes Kosovo. In 1996, the Republic of Macedonia, now North Macedonia, decriminalized homosexuality, and this was as a condition of joining the Council of Europe membership. The Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina also decriminalized. In 1998, the Republika of Srpska decriminalizes homosexuality, and that was one of the other regions in Bosnia. And in 1998, the Kosovo War erupts. So this was originally started by Kosovo Albanian separatist groups who wanted a greater Albania and had funding from Albanian expats and the state of Albania. And that group was called the Kosovo Liberation Army, who first attacked Serbian law enforcement in a long-winded battle for independence. As a result of the conflict between the Yugoslavian state and the Kosovo Liberation Army, in 1999, NATO bombed Yugoslavia, killing thousands and basically polluting the land with depleted uranium. In 2001, the first Belgrade Pride occurred right after Slobodan Milosevic was arrested by NATO forces. Despite this being a pride that just happened, football hooligans and far-right extremists, blessed by the Serbian Orthodox Church, basically attacked and stopped it in its steps. In 2002, the first Zagreb Pride was attempted, though this was attacked by local Nazi skinheads. And in 2003, the Brčko district, which is another district in Bosnia, decriminalized homosexuality, making Bosnia fully decriminalized. In 2006, Montenegro becomes independent, ending what at the time was known as the state of Serbia-Montenegro, fully balkanizing the region. In 2008, Kosovo declared independence from Serbia, though this is still in contempt between a lot of international parties, so depends who you ask on if they're independent or not. In 2014, Serbia finally allowed its first Belgrade Pride after banning it years prior due to security reasons. The mayor, 4 ministers, and over 1,000 people were in attendance, though this was also surrounded by over 7,000 riot police. The act was likely due to government wanting to please the EU since it was in control of pro-EU bourgeois parties. And it was also a very low political risk for the PM at the time, or the prime minister. There was also worries from a lot of the populace that the state wasn't actually able to protect its citizens after repeatedly canceling the pride in years past. So they wanted to show they had the ability to keep their citizens safe. Despite all of this, there was little resistance, and the prime minister, Vučić, did not attend and said there was bigger issues to worry about in Serbia. In 2017, Ana Brnabić became the first woman and openly gay person as a Serbian prime minister. She was also the first head of a Balkan country to ever attend a pride festival. Despite all of this, she rejected being branded as the gay prime minister and was the first LGBT world leader to have a child while in office. She also had strong pro-EU sensibilities, hence probably her being more chill about it because this is important to the bourgeois groups. In 2019, the nation of Bosnia and Herzegovina was finally the last of the Balkans to have a pride, with large numbers of counter-protesters sadly also in attendance. Prior attempts in the past were all crushed by Islamist Wahhabists, such as in the case of a 2008 small queer art festival. Despite many of the Bosnian region being Islamic, Wahhabists did not first gain momentum within the region until the Bosnian Civil War, where Mujahideen flooded the region and radicalized much of the populace. So this brings us to modern day former Yugoslavia, which clearly is a mess and possibly a downgrade, depending on who you ask, from the socialist times. And in the next episode, we will be delving into the life of LGBT people within the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. So until next time, thanks for listening. Bye, guys.